Welcome to the Book Editor Show, show number 14. We are continuing our four-part series on editing tips. This is part 2, line editing. If you haven't caught part 1 on general editing tips, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of actionable material that can put you right to work. I am Clark Chamberlain. I'm joined today by my stupendous co-host, the man whose voice launched 1,000 ships, Peter Turley. Peter, how are you doing today?
These intros are just getting better and better.
Yeah, well, you know, this is what I do at night. I sit around and I think, how can I introduce you better?
I was just about to sort of like bash you for recommending like your own show, but now I feel bad, so take that back.
Well, yeah, you know, is it weird that I give myself signed copies of my own book for Christmas?
No, not at all.
So, I'm excited to keep going on with these shows. These the editing tips I think are working really well, and hope that our audience has been able to put the last ones to direct use. So,
yeah, I think it was a great show, really useful. So, you know, if it has been useful for you, like let us know, because we'd love to hear you know, if you have been putting it to use.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know last time we just went just a little bit over, and we've got 7 tips on this one. So I think we probably better just dive right into this, because I know we're going to chase down something eventually on one of these and go down a whole nother show that could have been by itself.
That's it. We need to cut out the redundancies in the show. We need a verbal editor.
Yeah, we do. So, you know, it's funny because I've started getting some of our transcripts back, and I'm having to edit those as well just a little bit. But we do in a half hour. We speak about 5,000 words every half hour. So,
wow.
Yeah,
maybe I should do that when I'm writing my book. Sort of like just use like dictation software, but then it'll be like instructions like
Well, I've thought about that too. You know, I mean, shoot, I could, 5,000 words an hour every couple, or 5,000 words a half hour. That's 10,000 an hour. I'm writing a book a day. You know.
So in these like transcriptions do they have things like and all that, or is it trimmed down to just
they eliminate the verbal pauses, which is great.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, because I throw a lot of those in.
Yeah, I do. I'd make me look really stupid.
But I'm just using just some different people on Fiverr.com. Have you ever used Fiverr?
Yeah, it's really great. Use it for, you know, like book covers and simple things like that. It's really it's great freelancers out there for $5.
$5, you know, 15 minutes or 30 minutes. You know, I can usually find one 15 or 30 minutes of transcription work for $5. So it's good. It's good. Although sometimes I've been called Lark Chamberlain. So so
I like it.
Yeah. Or what was one of them? John Raw was spelled Jon, and then it had a space, and RAW, like raw. John Raw. I don't know. So
yeah. I mean, you don't want to get caught in the trap of having to like spend more time editing the transcript than you would transcribing it.
Well, yes, but you know, we're an editing show, and so I feel bad about just tossing it on there. Welcome to the Book Editor Show. Our transcripts are full of errors.
Welcome to the Book Editing Show, where we do none of the editing.
Oh, okay. We got to jump into this, or we're going to run out of time, and it's going to cost me $15 to get it transcribed. So. Today, of course, we are talking about the line edits. We've got 7 great tips here, actionable tips you can put right to work. Our first one is remove the adverbs. Of course, these are your ly words, the words ending in ly. Quickly search these out. You can just do a search for ly, and it's going to start popping every one of these up. Why do you want to remove these? Well, it's just because they're weak. There's so much other things you can do to describe these sentences better without using these ly words. A lot of times you can remove these just by themselves without having to change anything else in your sentence. You ought to have a goal. You know, you don't have to get rid of every one of them. Sometimes a sentence will not work, you know, that you try to rewrite it in a different way without the ly adverb, and it just nothing makes sense, and it becomes a really clumsy sentence. So sometimes you have to use it. My goal is only to have one of these appearing every 1,000 words. If I can have that, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, these are one of the, I was going to say more fun. I don't think I'd refer to editing as fun, but the easier ones to do, because find and replace works like a charm, because most of them are ly words, and as you just said, you don't necessarily have to change anything else. You might want to make the noun or the verb a bit stronger and use a better one, but sometimes you won't. You will just say he ran somewhere. You don't, or he sprinted, or you might already have the strong word and you've put an adverb in there just out of habit. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the, it's more fun in a real nerdy kind of way, because it is one of the easier ones to do.
Yeah, it really is. You just Control F, you find them, you just get rid of them. It's not a big deal, and it just strengthens up those lines, makes it just a little bit better. That's the easiest one. Coming up, the tip number 2 is replace the hollow words. I just mean your weak words. Replace those weak words. Talking about the adverbs, those are weak words. There are other weak words out there. I've got a small list. These are ones that I immediately look for, and they include thing, very, trying, started, began, stuff, got, went, because all of these words mean something very vague. He went across the street. It's not as good as a guy who's trundled across the street. There are a lot of really strong words that you can use instead of these, and just replace them out. You make your own list, try to figure out which ones you've got, and replace them. I had really on this list, but we've already removed it in the other word with the ly. So, what other ones are on your list, Peter?
I've got probably, nice, quite. So, like, I know we were talking a little bit about this before, but they're just weak words, and you don't need to. You don't want to say something like it was quite cold, because it's just a weak way of saying it. You want to say, ideally you want it to be freezing. You want to have a real visceral experience. Or you don't want to say like, he thought she was nice. You want to just be more descriptive and use stronger words. Seriously, sort of, supposedly, almost, totally. Things that they're just weak, and they don't need to be there. And if you spot them, you're probably going to be able to just rewrite the sentence. It's going to do so much for your writing when you take these out, and and especially things like almost. You could be slipping into the passive voice, by saying things like that. And looking these up, using the find and replace, it's really good. It's going to do wonders for your individual sentences.
Mm-hmm. It really will. And just along these lines, when you're going through and you're finding these, you're removing them, you're strengthening everything up, and you're going to get better when you go to your next book and you're writing it, and you're vomiting all this on the page. Sometimes, like, I've been able to eliminate began from my writing entirely. I don't have things where I don't do trying and I don't do begin. Those are 2 words that I've been able to eliminate, and I don't have to look for them anymore, because I never begin anything in my prose. Your word list is going to get shorter and shorter each time you go through these kind of drafts. One of the things you want to remember, though, is when you're removing these, is that we're talking about narrative prose here. You can have someone say the word really in a dialogue tense if they speak that way. You're going to have to make that decision about how their speech sounds, and how formal they are, and how weak their sentences are structured. So, but definitely from your narrative prose, the non-dialogue prose, you want to be able to remove these words, because it's just going to strengthen everything up. It's going to make it faster and engage more.
Yeah, because that's how it finds its way into the text, is because we do say these things, so they can have quite a justifiable place in your dialogue because we say them.
Well, yeah, like the word "really." It's really what I want.
It's a really nice word.
Yeah, it's a really nice word. You really have to see this. This is what he really meant. It's just some of these types of things. You just say them in your regular day to day, and yeah, it just makes it more difficult because all that's going to slip because of you as the author. All that's going to slip into your verbiage there when you're writing it out in your text. Our third tip here is remove the redundancies. So, for instance, he waved his hand. Instead of he waved his hand, he waved. He heard a dog bark. A dog barked. Is it for sale? Question mark. She asked. Changing that to is it for sale? Question mark. Because we know she asked it because there's a question mark. These are the types of things that sometimes we become redundant in what we say in our lines. We think that we need to add it for some reason. But really, it's just we know that there's only one thing that you can, there's only one kind of thing you can do this particular way. So why are you adding that onto it?
Yeah, like you could say the wet rain soaked his skin, or you don't need to say the rain is wet because it usually is 99% of the time pretty wet.
Very wet rain.
Yeah, sort of like it can be like a statement of the obvious, can't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like The Dark Knight, like as if not the Batman film, but the night was dark, like as opposed to all those bright nights that we have.
Yeah, exactly. And most of this stuff, and sometimes I think things are really redundant when you get into text description or a dialogue description. I come from the school of he said, she said, and that's it. I think very rarely do I do anything besides that because the dialogue itself should describe everything that I wanted to put in there. I don't need to say that he said it wryly or that he was said it superstitiously. Like these types of things should be there. He asked. Well, of course, he asked as a question mark. He exclaimed. There was already an exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. These types of things are redundant.
Yeah, the trickiest one there for me that I always wrestle with when I'm sort of going through and changing these dialogue tags is it's shouted. I too try to stick to said, and sometimes I just have to leave that one in there just every now and then, just because you do want to try and get it across in the dialogue. But for me, sometimes that one does just add a little something, and I'll choose to leave it there. But yeah, generally most of the time, we don't want to. You don't want to be saying all different, yelled, shouted, exclaimed, shrieked, cried. It becomes. It should be invisible, shouldn't it? Like the dialogue tag, really. You want to be skimming over it, and they skim over. The reader will skim over. He said,
yeah,
but they won't skim over. He cried.
Right, and it becomes because that's their fastest point of reading. That comes into a story is that we move really quick in dialogue. We go back and forth. Especially if there's only two characters, if you can establish quickly who's speaking first, you almost can eliminate dialogue tags altogether through the rest of it. And only occasionally for reference, just to remind people, if there was a pause there, or if if the one character is saying something, and then you have a description of something happening, and then he says something again, to remind you, it's still the same person speaking. So, because it's something. These are potholes sometimes, that pop people back out of things especially if you're using really weird descriptions or really flowery descriptions on dialogue tags. So.
He cried exuberantly.
Yes. Again, those are your adverbs, or you should have already taken them out. But sometimes, sometimes they still are there. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Even though he said, she said is a really good way of putting it. If you can train yourself to kind of establish who's in the scene and who's speaking, and get that sort of all done in the right order and the right way, where you only have to say it once, and then you can just have dialogue flow in and interspersed with action. And if you can train yourself to write like that, then you're going to be trimming on your word count, you're cutting out these redundant words, and you're going to be a better writer.
Yeah, well, and I know we're going down the dialogue path right now instead of talking about the redundancies here, but just one other thought with this, is that this is where you tighten up the speech of the individual character who's speaking. I have read a number of manuscripts where every voice sounds the same. You're creating a unique voice by using particular words or how they say particular words, and immediately that that's the character. You find those really good books that you're like, yes, that's who it is that's speaking. There's in my own, I have a character named Rachel, and she says dude. And if the word dude is in the sentence there, that's who's speaking, because no one else in the entire book ever uses the word dude. Samantha Shannon, the Bone season, she has a character who says my lovelies. No one else in the book says my lovelies. You know immediately that that's this particular character because of the term my lovelies. So
sounds like something Gollum would say.
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, and like Schmeagol and Gollum, have a different way of saying certain things too, But yeah, my precious, my lovelies, my precious, whatever that is, that's their dialogue tag. You don't have to say Gollum said, because it was my precious is there, so.
My precious, that Gollum.
That Gollum. Yeah, well, we know that. So those are redundancies. If you can create those good character dialogues, or not having to use character dialogues because you're creating good character dialogue. Moving on to number 4, tip number 4, use contractions. The reason why we would do this is to create smoother reading sounds, more natural that way. Especially in dialogue, but also in your narrative. You can easily find these, by looking, like if you're trying to find I am, you do your search, your Control F, find and replace for I am, and then you're going to change it to I'm. There's a whole bunch of these that are available. Some of these you're going to have already removed because you've gotten rid of the to be verbs, but you still have some that I've and you've, we're. So these are ones that you can get rid of or contract them together. It just makes it read easier. Again, just quickly talking about dialogue, if your character does speak in a very formal English, of course you're not going to contract it, but but you can use those there. So.
Yeah, and that's so important to point out, because I'm not joking, especially depending on obviously where you are on your journey as a writer. But I know when I started out, I wrote formally. I don't know why, whether it was just because I thought, well, I'm working on a novel, so it's got to sound quite formal, and I wouldn't put contractions in, and it was only when sort of like going back and looking, I was like, God, that sounds stuffy. That just sounds awful. And it was like, I almost didn't think I could use contractions in prose, like a long time ago, but it just makes it sound so much like smoother and so much more normal, and it's like what people are used to reading and used to seeing, and
yeah,
it's horrible.
Yeah, so listeners, if you feel like Peter once did, that you can't use a contraction, remember, this is not technical writing here. You're writing fiction, and we give you permission. You can use the contractions. That's all right.
Yeah, you can take that to the bank.
Yeah, exactly, right there. But no, I know what you meant, because I did the same thing, and this is you'll catch it. As soon as you start reading this out loud, you're like, oh my goodness, this is just terrible. Man, this guy sounds stupid. So.
Yeah, it's so much less sort of like trying to be something, less pretentious. It's less like, the prose is so much more forgiving when there's contractions in it.
Yeah,
it seems like it's trying to be something else, and it's going to be judged like accordingly.
Yeah,
it's like you're writing like you should know what you're on about, and you don't.
But the contractions are really easy to find. You can go online, just type up contraction word list, and it will pull up an amazing.
Definitely don't type contraction.
Just how to use contractions. You might find some different websites. Instead of birthing your novel, you might be making a baby birth out. So, so using the contractions is very simple. Just find them, replace them. Pick the ones that you want. You'll also, like we said before, some of these you probably have already removed with your to be's verbs reduction from the general tips from last time. Tip number 5, remove repetitive sentence starters. What this means is you're going to take a look at your sentence, and you're going to look at the sentences before it and the ones that come after it, and you're going to see how many times you use the same word to start each of those sentences. And if it's more than 3, or if it's 3 or more, you need to start removing some of those and changing it up.
Or 5 or 6 or 7.
5 or 6. And so my worst ones are the pronouns he and she. Oh my goodness, I can go through a draft and it's she picked up the knife and went this way, and she did this, and she did that, and she did this, and everything starts with she. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is terrible.
Yeah, I'm like completely guilty of that as well. Like just before I was like editing something, and I sort of like said the guy's name at the beginning, and then it was like every sentence it was like he did this, he did that, and I was just like, oh, that's painful. It especially in the first draft, that that's just seems to be how I write it, and it's good to try and shake that because it really takes some brain work later on, doesn't it, to try and think of a different way to do it.
Yeah, it really does. And especially if you're doing a lot of action-oriented stuff. If you have, it's not so bad when you're doing, let's talk about a lens here, like if you were filming a movie, and you do a close-up, and of course that's when you're using things like he and she, you're using the pronoun, and if you were zoomed clear back, then it would be more descriptive words about the countryside and everything, and you don't have it as much. So, or thoughts of the in-between situations happening. But when you're in that moment scene, those are really hard to eliminate. One of the things that I found is that kind of skip. So, like, I have a tendency to write this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And that's where I've had the she. And so instead of that middle one, I start that one with after. So, after the book was put away, this happened, and so like there's little things you can do, and you skip over this one and move to that one because you don't have to give a play-by-play of a close-up action scene, of things happening. You can, if the person was sitting and now have gone to the kitchen, you don't need to tell how they stood up and how they took 1 step and 2 steps and 3 steps and she took the next step. There's just things you can skip over there and try to think of it that way. Where can I skip this? And I can do another sentence about the skipping part, and then I can do the next action sentence.
Yeah, and this is a tough one, so don't stress out if you look through your writing and this is everywhere, because this is something we do, especially in action, because it does keep it quick to be like this happened, this happened, this happened, he did this, he did this, he did that, he said this. But it's just worth looking at it and just thinking about it and seeing if you can do it a little bit differently. But also, because I go through and I think, okay, so I've said he a bit too much. Should I use the name again? Because I can't think of another way to start the sentence. So this is going to happen. It's not like you have to remove them all, but just take a look at it when you're doing these line edits. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could even go back. Remember the episode we did on the scene sequel. If you can take a cue from that, that the idea of a feeling, of a reaction, and an action, and maybe you can add some of that into it in between, that you've got an action, and then the next one starts again with the feeling, and not she felt, but then you can just move these forward, and you kind of look at a pattern of, first happens is what they feel, the next thing is perhaps a reaction, and then a chosen action, and
say, like, anger poured over them. You can just go straight into the emotion without saying he felt angry, and because
Right.
that would also be a tell as
Uh-huh.
well to say like he felt angry. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, like the anger poured over him. He picked up the knife and moved forward. So like you've got a very normal flow with being inside that character and the actions that are occurring inside the internal thought process quickly to move to the next process and then the final process. And so then you can move some of those around. I mean, it's just one way to look at it. It's just one way. If you've got a whole bunch of those, you've got 5 sentences in a row that start with she. No, you can do some of this and remove a couple of those out of it.
Definitely, that scene sequels are really good one to check out. As you say, that's a really great tip for because I've been stuck on that myself. That is a tough one. And if you've not listened to scene sequel, then bad. You should be listening to these in order. So go back and because you definitely don't want to be doing the line edits before the general edit. So if you've not listened to it, go back and listen to last week's episode now.
That's right. So, and all of this is just fantastic stuff to put into your toolbox for your editing time, and plus you get to listen to Peter more. I mean, at night I just listen to his voice on the recordings again. It helps me sleep.
Yeah, you actually edit them over, don't you? And like,
yeah, I do.
Edit,
I remove
your own
myself.
voice out. And
So.
Wait, to get to sleep? No, that's an insult. Oh, I thought that was a compliment. I'm going to take that as a compliment. Yeah, the soothing.
It is soothing. It's
Soothing my voice.
Send you bedtime stories.
Dulcet.
So,
I'm just going to cut the first 10 seconds of this episode in the way you introduced me, and I'm going to play it on a loop as I'm going to sleep. Like positive reinforcement.
It is. You know, you got to have that. So, number 6 here on our next one is precise prose. The idea of being able to clearly say what it is that you mean. So, Peter, take this one away. You had some really good ideas with this.
Yeah. So this is it's the complete opposite of like purple prose and flowery prose, and you might have heard us in it referred to as Orwellian prose, and thusly I think it was George Orwell, and hence the term being coined. So that said that your writing should be like a window through which the reader can see the story. So it shouldn't be like purple prose would be like a stained glass window where you're looking at the window and it's really beautiful and it's really nice and you might have all these flowery words and these adverbs, but you're going to be drawing too much attention to the text and the writing. It should be, you want it to be clear and you want it to be precise and concise, and you can achieve this by doing some of the things we've already mentioned, but by doing this, it's just going to be a window through which they can see the story and they can access what's going on, and they're not paying attention to how you're constructing your sentence, because we go to all this work as writers and editors to learn how to construct a good sentence, and it is a lot of work, but it's amazing that it's a lot of work to learn how to write something simply. So the finished product is going to be a short, simple sentence that just looks so basic, but is completely necessary to just getting the story across, because that's what we're doing. We're telling a story. We're not trying to construct a really beautiful sentence.
Exactly. If you want to do poetry, that's fantastic. Go do poetry. Here you're telling a story, and that's just a perfect way to put that. I can't put that any better. So I'm not even going to try. So just work on it. Go back, listen to this. You've got the lines. Just make them make sense. You don't have to have all that extra into it, and it's just going to pull people in.
Yeah. So I mean, we've covered some of the stuff, but just to sort of reiterate, you can. It's things like removing the semicolons and your redundant words and run-on sentences and checking for comma splices and using your varying sentences as well, because you don't want to just have all short sentences, but to just keep it precise, make sure you're using the right noun and the right verb, and so you're not having to add all this other junk into the sentence. And it's going to be, I think, as you said earlier when we were talking about this, you said it helps with pacing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does, and you pull that in, and so that the sentence just flows from the one to another. And you're going to find these clunky sentences, and you're going to make them more precise because you're reading it out loud, and you're just going to use these tools that we're giving you here, these tips, and this is what the final product is, that you're going to have these sentences that just people don't notice. People don't notice how good they are. You're not drawing any attention to it, but it works. We don't want to know when you're on the highway driving. You notice the problems in the highway. You don't notice how smooth it is. When it's working, we don't notice. When our bodies are healthy, we don't notice that we're healthy. We notice it when it's sick. And so anytime that you're pulling attention, drawing attention to the actual words in the sentence, that it's pulling the person out of the story. You want to engage them in the story so they forget that they're reading and they just continually read. And then that's the story that really gets shared.
Well, I love a good metaphor. So a clunky sentence would be like a crash on the highway of your prose.
Yeah, and it really can be. Like every time, right now, all I'm doing is hitting potholes out on the road when I'm driving for real. And I just think about this, like, man, you just get pulled out of the story.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And it is a lot of work just for it to be ignored, but that's the aim of the game.
It is, and it's just what you're headed for, and that's what you're going to be able to create. And I think it's pretty awesome.
I can't remember who said it, but I heard, and I bear this in mind sometimes when I'm writing, and if I'm feeling a bit stuck. But I mean, it comes into editing, it comes into the precise prose. I can't remember who said it, but it was basically that the job of each individual sentence is simply to get you to the next sentence. And especially when you're doing these line edits and you are looking at the micro level, just consider that its job is just to move the reader along and not stop them at that sentence.
Yeah. Moving us along, we're almost out of time again. Number 7 is the cliches and metaphors. So cliches, we want to be able to remove these as much as possible, because in that first draft that you're going to write, you're probably going to toss some of these in, because it's just how we think. We use cliches in our speech on a regular basis, using metaphors the wrong way, or just using them to remove it. So I had one idea with this, and if you can't remove the cliche entirely, you change it so that people don't recognize it as the cliche, and it makes them stop for a moment. There was an old song, there's the term head over heels, and I think I should have looked it up in between, but I think it's a Alanis Morissette song. But anyway, and then she changed it, instead of saying head over heels, she said head over feet. And that stuck. It's not the normal cliche. It sounds different, and that's what you want to do. If you can't remove it, you change it in a way that makes people notice that it's not a cliche any longer.
Yeah. But and this again is something that we do easily, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. We do. We're putting it in, and again, the reason why you want to remove this, it's just lazy. It's just lazy writing. It's lazy because it's so well known now that you have to do it. Now, sometimes I point out the cliche nature of certain things in my story, especially thrillers, because thrillers have become such a cliche as a genre in itself. There's sometimes that I will actually point out, the character points out how cliche they are in some instances. So.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you are going to have sort of like, because I worry sometimes, especially like writing fantasy, like, God, this has been done so many times before. But then it's okay to have sort of like tropes of the genre.
Yeah.
Without necessarily sort of like having cliches in the in the writing, or anything that's. Yeah, it's walking that line between a trope and a cliche.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. It's just a decision you're going to have to make, and where to use it, and to use it well. And you mentioned when we were off air talking about you might create your own cliche. If you're using the same line again and again and again throughout the story, then in itself it might become a cliche.
Yeah, if you describe the sun the exact same way each time, you the character notices the sun. Maybe he likes sunbathing and often stares at the sun. I don't know. But if you're describing that the same way every time, then that's going to get boring really fast, and you're going to get flagged as a bad writer, which is,
Yeah. So those are things you got to look for. So again, our 7 tips for the line editing tips. These are all great things to put into your editing toolbox. The first one was remove the adverbs. The second one was replace the hollow words. That's getting rid of the weak words. Remove the redundancies. The fourth one is use contractions, talking about the word ones. The fifth one is remove repetitive sentence starters, like pronouns. And number 6 was the precise prose. That way they can clearly see what it is that you're saying. And number 7 is beware of your cliches and metaphors and remove them as necessary. So, Peter, it's been a good show. This was a lot of fun talking about these today.
Yeah, it's been really great and a perfect follow-on from last week's general edits.
Yeah, I think, if you haven't listened to that one, go back, listen to it now. This is just some really good actionable material. You can put it right to work for you. So, but Peter, thank you so much for being here today.
It's been a pleasure. But if it has been useful, we do want to hear about it because we want to be useful.
Yeah, we do. We want to be giving you the show that you want to listen to. So, but thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes. If you are an editor who would like to be a guest host on the show or an author who would like us to edit your work live on air, please drop us a line. Go to thebookeditorshow.com, drop us a line, let us know. For Peter Turley, I am Clark Chamberlain, and keep learning, keep writing, and build a better book.